As a mom, you give feedback to your kids all
Mm-hmm.
the time, and you love your kids, and you do it out of love because you want them to become the best adult version of themselves possible. You want to give them the best opportunities in life. I tried, if I'm prepared, it takes away the stress. It also, if I'm prepared, it allows me to fill in the blanks on my agenda with my workout, with my errands, with my, the stuff that you need to do in your life. And I think for me, that preparation time really allows me to live my life the way I want to live it. The fact that I get my energy, my creativity, my critical thinking from thinking out loud, which is something, by the way, that drives my husband crazy. And every time she would start a soccer game, I would embarrass her. I would be on the sideline, and I would do, which is an Edna mode thing. I would say, "Go, fight, win."
What advice would you give to someone that is struggling to find success and fulfillment as a leader? 10 questions for the inspiring, aligned leader. This is 10 Qs. Hey everyone, it's Michelle from Stone Ledge. Today we kick off the fully reimagined series now called 10 Questions for the Mindful, Aligned Leader. And I'm beyond excited that our very first guest in this new series is the one, the only Valerie Cockerell. Now, Valerie was born and raised in France, and after graduating with a degree in business hospitality, she participated in something called the World Showcase Fellowship Program over there at Epcot. And then she must have really enjoyed that experience because she eventually joined the Disneyland Paris in 1991. And if I'm not mistaken, that is where Valerie met her now husband, Dan Cockerell. So she has more experience than I can share in this brief intro, but I know that she went on to a variety of retail leadership roles for incredible business units like Epcot, Downtown Disney, and Disney Cruise Line. At one point, she left to start her own retail consulting firm. And then when she eventually came back to Disney, she came back as a contract facilitator for the Disney Institute. And that's where I had the extraordinary opportunity to meet and work with Valerie. And let me tell you, and I can actually say this now, she was one of my favorite contract facilitators to work with. And not only was she just incredible on stage, but her level of professionalism and the ability to answer questions when our participants had them. In fact, I once worked with a senior leader by the name of Bruce Jones, and this just stayed with me for years. Bruce Jones used to say that when the hands went up, that's when the real value came from the facilitator. So when people ask questions, and I remember very distinctly, people used to raise their hand and go, "All right, Disney, I understand how you're doing it. Here's what's going on in my organization." And let me tell you, Valerie was one of those facilitators that could handle those questions with incredible experience, with ease, and with just such profound professionalism. So I could go on and on about how much I value Valerie as a business leader, but not only have I seen her on stage, we've actually shared some pretty epic adventures out there in Colorado with Valerie and Dan. In fact, hopefully we'll be able to get into some of those epic hikes, 10 plus milers in the mountains just south of Boulder that we call death marches. But that's a story for another time. But we've just had some real fun with Valerie and Dan. And I have to tell you, not only is she a great storyteller, but she has had more epic adventures and worldwide, stories than anyone that I've ever met. So I know that's a lot of buildup. So without any further ado, please welcome to 10 Qs, Valerie Cockerell.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Michelle. This is quite an introduction. I don't think I've received ever such a nice introduction. I'm really flattered. So thank you. And I'm honored to be the first guest in your newly updated, reformatted 10 Qs. So I'm ready for you.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, you and I both know I've always enjoyed your stories and conversations with you. And so as we started thinking about the type of talent we wanted on this series. You know, you were literally the first name that came to my mind. So I appreciate you saying yes, especially with all of the incredible travels that you and Dan are doing now. And I know I gave you a pretty long introduction, a good introduction, but really no one can introduce you like you can. So, Valerie, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're working on right now?
Well, but what haven't you said about me? That was such a great introduction. Well, obviously, I'm French, born and raised. I think maybe you mentioned that. You mentioned I started my career with Disney at Disneyland Paris, actually in Orlando, but that led to Disney offering me a position to open Disneyland Paris. And I met Dan. We relocated to the US in 97 and we worked for Disney. So I worked for Disney on and off for about 16 years. Primarily in retail initially. And as you mentioned, and I had the privilege of working with you and at the world-renowned Disney Institute, where I learned some new skills. I learned about public speaking. I learned about formalizing my approach to customer service, to leadership. And I guess a lot of these things, I had them in me. I just didn't know how to share them with others. So that was great and a great opportunity, great learning opportunity for me. I think I've always been a curious person. As a child, I was very curious. I knew there was a whole world out there, which I was really eager to go and discover, which motivated me to move to England when I was 16. And I had at the time about 5 words of English. And that's where I learned English. And that's how I got a job with Disney.
Nice.
So that was a pretty bold move at 16 to do, but that really set the course of my career. And so I think this is a theme that I have now in retrospect. I see this theme along my life and along my career, always trying new things, visiting new places, interacting with different people. I really value diversity. I really enjoy encountering people from different thoughts, perspective, cultures, different background. So I guess that's one of the things that I aspire to do in my work and in my life. Now you asked me about what we working on right now. Dan and I started a consulting company about 5 years ago. We travel extensively. We do quite a bit of work abroad, probably because both of us enjoy that diversity as much as we do. And we have quite a network, or we built quite a network over the course of our life around the world, which has led us to work abroad and continue to work in the US. And then the main thing I'm working on right now, well, I just released a book called Manage Like a Mother, and I'm very excited about it. It's getting good. I'm getting good feedback, a lot of interest, because I think it's one, very simple, two, very relatable. We all have a mother in our life. We all have a mother figure. So a lot of the stories I share and the learnings I share are just easily understood. And having worked at the Disney Institute, very well, as much as I do, that when people relate, when it's simple and people remember it, then they can implement it. They can extract the learnings and implement this. And that's all I'm aspiring to do, really. So I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because you're absolutely right. You can say, here are the facts of a situation, or be completely pragmatic. But what people typically remember, and we did see this at the Disney Institute as well, is if you share an insight and then you illustrated that insight, especially with a story, which, by the way, I've read the book. Thank you for the early release copy. And the stories in there are what I remember the most. It was really some incredible leadership tips, but you illustrated them with the most memorable stories. And so it ends up being kind of part of, my approach now, as opposed to just a great book that I read. So you did a really wonderful job, and congratulations on the release.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So Valerie, we're going to get into our 10 questions. And the first question has to do with focus and energy. I'm a fan of Tony Robbins. I got to see him on stage like 25 years ago, and it literally changed how I looked at the rest of my life in terms of business. I wanted to become a businesswoman after I got to see him on stage. And he very famously says, where focus goes, energy flows. So where is your focus these days? Like, what is that thing, that big rock that's right in front of you right now that is getting the most of your focus?
Well, I'm still very much in the marketing and the talking about the book. I do a lot of podcasts, and in the process of that, I'm seeing or discovering more material, and I'm starting to turn some of the stones that I've or the stepping stone that I've built while writing the book, and I'm starting to look underneath and discover more material. So I'm being very disciplined with this, and I'm starting to take some notes, and it's kind of a big word salad right now.
Yeah.
But what I'm hoping is that maybe there'll be a sequel to the book, because as most authors would acknowledge, or at least I'm sure most authors would relate to, is the fact that once you've cut the umbilical cord with your book and you've given it to the publisher and it's out there, now you want to go back and add some things or correct some things, or put an addendum to the book. And I find myself more and more thinking about additional things. So I think that maybe the next big block, not immediately but in the midterm or so, it's going to be maybe putting those ideas together and maybe formatting a new book or a sequel or additional 2.0 version of the book. So that's what I'm thinking about right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know there's probably a lot of aspiring authors that are watching right now. And I've written a book as well, so I understand the process. I have a follow-up question for you regarding the stories that you told in that book. Did the stories, was it kind of a situation where this is the insight, or this is the point I'm trying to make, and you know what, I've got a good story for that? Or over the course of the last, let's say 10, 20 years, did you start to think in the back of your mind, this would be a good story for a book someday, this would be a good story? So did you start to curate that content, or was it literally as you were writing, stories came, memories came back to say this would be a good way to illustrate this point?
I don't think I curated the stories, but first of all, the starting point was my father-in-law, who often talked about how his mother back in Oklahoma was so influential in his life, and how she, obviously made him the man he is and influenced his leadership approach. So that was the first starting point. And one of the most obvious, there were two things that were striking to me. The first one had to do with training and raising my three kids. I remember teaching my kids how to walk, and that how that entire process felt, how flexible I was with the timeline, how encouraging and supportive I was, how I celebrated efforts and not so much the achievement. So when I started thinking about all of that, I'm thinking, well, all this applies to leadership. All these things, you need to be supportive, you need to be flexible, you need to make sure they understand failure is an option and it's okay and it's normal. You need to make sure people train in a stress-free environment. So that was the first connection. The second one that was obvious to me was feedback.
Mm-hmm.
As a mom, you give feedback to your kids all
Mm-hmm.
the time, and you love your kids, and you do it out of love because you want them to become the best adult version of themselves possible. You want to give them the best opportunities in life. So I started with those two things, and then I started thinking about communication, and I started thinking about problem solving and creativity and curiosity and setting expectations. And every time I went and looked at the different leadership competencies, I'm like, oh, you do that as a mom, and here's how I do it. And you know what, if I were to apply the very same principles to my leadership approach, 95% of the time it would work. So this is how it happened. And then I had stories, like teaching my kids how to ride a bike, or setting expectation for my teenage son when we gave him a car and what we expected him to do. So the stories came so easily afterwards. So what really worked in my favor is that the principle of the book were always very clear, and the structure of the book always came very clear. And because you and I have worked in a storytelling company, we know that if you want to teach something, like you said, the best way is to put a story and illustrate it with a good story. So that's how I built every single chapter and every single competency in the book. The first part of the chapter is a story about me as a mom, something that happened with my kids. Actually, I think there's only one story, one exception to this is the one on storytelling, where I talk about my mother and something that impacted me tremendously when I grew up. So every time there is a very personal story, and then the second half of the chapter is about those golden nuggets, those learnings that you can extract from that situation. So the structure of the book just it kind of flowed easily, and that's what made it really easy to write. I should have written it a lot faster than I did, but I was working and then putting the book down for about 3 or 4 months at a time, not touching it, and then going back. And like most people, you go and you tweak and you reread a chapter and you're like, don't like this. Oh, I need to add something. Anyway, so it ended up taking me about 18 months. If I had written nonstop, I'm sure I could have put that book together in about 3 months, because it was so, easy and so evident to me. It was obvious. And so anyway, we'll see. Hopefully it will feel that way to the reader also.
Yeah. And it does. And as you were saying that, the stories just flowed as you were writing. I can tell you, as a reader of your book, that it flowed for me as a reader too. It did not feel like, let's just say 10 disparate stories, like stories that were not connected. There was a very natural sequence to them, a beautiful flow. It was a wonderful, I think I read it over the course of a weekend, because it was just that good. And so you definitely have a gift for, I knew you had a gift for speaking on stage, and you clearly have a gift for articulating your thoughts and writing as well.
Now, the interesting thing about writing this particular book is, once I was done with it, I sent it to my 3 children, and I said, please read it. And if there's anything you are uncomfortable with, I'll be happy to take it out of the book. And we tweaked a couple of things, but nothing major. I think they're all grown, young adults now, and they were comfortable. They understand the purpose, they understand the whole process, and they were okay with it. But I had to be very mindful of that.
I didn't know that I imagine that you ran it by them, because there's some pretty personal stories in there. But it's nice to know that they're like, yeah, thumbs up, mom, we've got your back. Beautiful. And you raised some wonderful children, by the way, too.
We tried.
Don't we all? We all do. I know that you mentioned earlier, not only launching the book, but that you and Dan have been traveling a lot for business internationally, back and forth to Colorado. What do you do to make sure that you effectively manage your energy during those really peak moments? Because you're not just traveling for vacation, you're traveling and then needing to step on stage. And if I'm not mistaken, not too long ago, you stepped on stage in front of thousands of people. So as you're going between time zones and between, different countries, how do you keep your energy high so that you can perform at your best?
I think I am fortunate in the sense that I'm a very extrovert person. If you've ever done the Myers-Briggs assessment, I'm like on the very end, that first preference, that first dichotomy, I am on the very end of the spectrum when it comes to being an extrovert. I gain energy from people. I gain energy from talking, from engaging with people. I know that people on the other end of the dichotomy, introverts, are depleted by this. For me, I feed off that. However, with this said, you can only do that for so long. So like in August, that trip that you mentioned, we were in Brazil, we were there for 5 weeks, and it was go, 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 engagement, meeting people, not just keynotes. There were a couple of workshops, a couple of keynotes, a couple of just, meeting future clients. And it was great. And I loved it. I loved the energy. I enjoyed it thoroughly. After 5 weeks, however, I was thrilled to come back home, sleep in my own bed, unpack my suitcase, get my comfort, get my routine again, live a healthier lifestyle also, because we are much healthier in Colorado than on the road. When you're on the road, you eat out a lot, people invite you, you're not as disciplined with working out. So coming back to Colorado really feels like, all right, let's reset, regroup, get back to our healthy lifestyle, take care of our mind and body. and make sure that we get ourselves organized again. And I need that, even though I'm an extrovert and I love the energy of, being on the road and all this. I need at least a little bit of time where I can just get my sanity again, and rest and get a routine. So
Well said. Very good. I'm the same. Once if and probably I get there a lot quicker than you do in terms of, okay, I just need some time, because I'm not all the way on the other end of that spectrum, but I'm definitely on the introverted side. So I do not get energized by just frequently being on stage. So totally understand that. So a little bit of a fun question for you, Valerie. If you had a leadership superpower, what would it be?
I would love to be able to read people's mind. I mean, and maybe even more understanding how they're feeling, because first, I guess it's a wonderful skill to have, but this is not something I'm always very good at. I don't know. I'm such in a hurry sometimes. I don't think about, okay, what are they thinking? What are they feeling? I'm going to the solution. I was telling you earlier, I'm a fixer.
Yeah.
And I'm solution driven. And I know that, emotional intelligence is something that we all need to develop more and use more. And in all honesty, I'm not very good at that. And I think if I could read people's mind, it would help me understand their point of view and take the time to appreciate it. I'm quick, in again, referring back to Myers-Briggs, the second dichotomy is about how you retain information, how you absorb information. And some people have the S, so they sensing, they're based on facts, something. And then you have the N, the people who are driven by intuition. They already put the data together and they start projecting and thinking about the future. That's me. I pick up the data and then I'm running with it. And I think if I could, get a little understanding of what goes in people's mind, it would force me to slow down, take that into consideration, and then move on, and then take the learnings, and then make decisions down the road. I'm not very good at this, so I think my superpower would definitely, I would want to read their mind and understand it and internalize it.
That's fair. This might sound a little esoteric, but my experience with you is that your gut feel, let's just call it your intuition, regarding people in general, I've always found to be pretty spot on, because we've had some really nice conversations in terms of, let's just say, strengths, weaknesses, who's going to perform well, that type of thing. And I've just always found that your intuition, you can read people, you understand people. So probably just a little bit more than what you're expressing now, just based on my experience. But I think it's a good superpower to have.
It's funny because working with my husband, we talk about that a lot. Sometimes we sit in a meeting together with a prospective client, and we come out of the meeting with a totally different view on how it went.
Yeah.
And we're just puzzled. And because we're married to each other, we don't hold back. We're very candid and very transparent about how we feel. And I may walk out of the meeting and say, you know what? Nothing good's gonna come out of this. This is not gonna be productive. That was a waste of our time. And Dan would be like, that was great. It's so, it's such a great opportunity. And I'm like, were we sitting in the same meeting? Really? But it shows, the range of perspective, how far apart we can be. And we just, because we're so, connected, and we're so, married to each other, I guess, we realize that, people can have a totally different interpretation of the very same event. And that has been a big learning curve for the two of us. And we've discovered things about each other, how we analyze situation, how we perceive people.
Oh yeah.
Too. So it's great.
Oh yeah. And since you started working together on the consulting business, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we always joke, we say we're still married, so I guess we're doing okay.
Yeah, it is totally not the same thing. But AJ and I, as you know, are in business together, and he's my favorite son. He's my only son. I always felt like I knew him really well growing up, as we know our kids, but it is a different type of communication. It is a different type of how you handle situations, how you handle stress, how you handle, what you were talking about in terms of, just, business development. And thankfully, we're still in business together. And not only that, I feel like we are closer now than we've ever been. Just we can almost read each other's minds at this point because we've been through so many scenarios with Stone Ledge. So I'm totally vibing with what you're saying. I have a very unfair question to ask, and you don't have to answer, but you talked about coming out of meetings, you think, yeah, this isn't going to work. And he's like, no, that was great. Is it fair to ask, like, who's usually right?
That's me.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. No, I would claim that it's me, but I think sometimes I'm quick to make a judgment and evaluate, and I've come to regret sometimes. Dan is like, give it sometimes,
Yeah.
and you may hear crickets from a client for a while, and I'm kind of telling Dan, see, told you so. And then boom, 2 months later, we get a call. Hey, we are coming. We actually talked to a client yesterday. Had been a year and a half since we heard from them.
Yeah.
And now they're back.
Yeah.
So you never know. And I think Dan is more inclined to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I may be quicker to say, no, not happening. That's it. And then put it aside and ignore it, because I don't think anything's going to come out of this particular conversation or project or whatever. So I think it's objectively it's probably 50-50.
I wasn't trying to pick on Dan either, so or create any riffs, just was curious. And you're absolutely right, especially B2B and consulting. The runway can be notoriously long. And then sometimes you have one conversation and you're doing a keynote 3 weeks later. It's just, it's an interesting business. It's not for everyone, but it is certainly exciting when you hit your stride.
Yep.
So switching topics a little bit, because at Stone Ledge, we talk a lot about this concept called the aligned leadership model, which is equal parts, developing your people, making sure you're prioritizing and driving the right business results, but also embracing mindfulness. So making sure that your mental and physical energy is consistently high. And so we talk about the correlation between mindfulness and leadership specifically. So Valerie, do you have any, let's call them mindfulness life hacks that you utilize or that you utilize to influence your leadership approach or even what you're doing as a consultant?
I'm usually very tactical in my approach. So my life hack probably has a lot to do with time management.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, I don't like surprises. So one of the things I do, I try, if I'm prepared, it takes away the stress. It also, if I'm prepared, it allows me to fill in the blanks on my agenda with my workout, with my errands, with my, the stuff that you need to do in your life. And I think for me, that preparation time, really allows me to live my life the way I want to live it. So one of the things I do, for instance, if I go to bed at night, before I fall asleep, I have to, it's not something I decided to do, but I realize for my own mental well-being, I have to run through my head, what do I have tomorrow? I need to have a good understanding of how my day is going to play out. Because that discomfort, if I do not know that, I'm not going to sleep well, I'm not going to be rested, and the next day is not going to start very well. Mm-hmm. So that is, for me, something that has become a routine, and I realize I do so much better when I feel that I have control of my time. I don't always have it in reality, but at least I'm being proactive. I do not like being operating in reactive mode. I don't do well. This is where things start unraveling. So I think that would be my little thing that I do is every night, just before I fall asleep, tomorrow I have this, and that's it. And then I can fall asleep nicely.
Yeah, that's perfect, because I find that based on personal experience, but also just in research, the thing that keeps people awake during the night more than anything else is what's going on up here. So what's going on in their mind. And for you to have a process, and it sounds like a must, that you have to almost unpack what's going on tomorrow. So, like, just kind of mentally prepare yourself for the day ahead. That allows you that peace, that allows you that ability to fall into a good sleep. So that's a really good one.
Yeah. There's another thing too that I've started doing recently, and that has helped me a lot. I try when in the first 2 hours of the day, I try not to read emails.
Mm.
And the reason why I do this is because unless I have nothing to do that day, but if I already have things to do, I find that if I start reading my emails, there's a whole bunch of new things that come and they drain me of energy. They suddenly take my attention. I'm starting to think about, oh, that email just came from the leasing office and I need to, sign the lease to renew it. And then I got an email from this. So all of this stuff starts spinning in my head and prevents me from being, focused on those important things that I've got built in my schedule already. So what I do now, I try not to look at my emails until late morning if I can. And that allows me to start my day by being really productive on the things that I had previously scheduled. And that gives me a great sense of satisfaction. It also gives me a sense of I'm in control of my day versus opening emails and then, everything lands on your plate and now you start picking at it and you may not address the big priorities that you should be addressing. You may be procrastinating on things that you do not, you're not looking forward to doing. But so now
Right.
you're going to start picking at your emails. What's the I think it's called the Parkinson law, where you stretch
Yeah.
the
About time.
things that
Yeah.
that you like doing, so you have an excuse so you don't address the things you don't like doing.
Right.
So that's the idea. So that has helped me being more productive at the beginning of the day, and that's where you have the most energy too, so where
Yeah.
you can accomplish the most. So let's not pollute it with all these other things if you
Yeah.
can afford to do that.
No, I love that. And that really is a good segue into the next question, because I'm a big fan of what we call morning routines. And at Stone Ledge, we say, start the day aligned. So besides not looking at email for the first 2 hours, which I totally advocate for, I do not look at my phone, social media, email, what's going on at work until I complete my morning alignment routine. Because it does exactly what you just said. It takes my mind from, okay, I'm setting myself up for success mentally, emotionally, just energetically, to checklist, checklist, checklist. Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I need to reach out to this person. It's like, I consider it other people's demands for my time and attention. Where that first hour, I make all about me so that I do have the best chance of having an aligned day. So besides not looking at your email for the first couple of hours, what other things do you do every morning to kind of set yourself up for success?
I have a pretty um set routine. The first thing, first of all, I take medication in the morning, so I drink a lot of water with the medication when I first wake up, and then I have to wait. I can't have breakfast or anything to eat for about an hour. So what I typically do and that's when we're home, things change quite drastically when we're on the road. But I take my meds, I drink water, and then there's a couple of things I do. So like I mentioned, the night before, I've have in my mind, it's very clear what I have to accomplish that day. I run through my head what I have, and now I fill in the blanks. So I may have a call at 9 a.m., another one at 11, and then one at 1. And I'm thinking, okay, my call at 9 will take 9 to 9:30. Maybe between 9:30 and 11, I can go work out, or I can go grocery shopping, or knock some of the smaller tasks on my to-do list, which are not the must do, but I have to address them eventually. Or maybe I have a big project down the line that I've broken down in little bite size, and that hour window that suddenly is open, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take care of this little thing in that moment. So that morning, what I try to do in my mind is really fill up my day with all the other things that need to happen. So that's for the organizational part of it. Then I usually call my mom or my sister. So that's my other bucket. It's, working on relationship, because first of all, we have an 8-hour difference with friends from Colorado. So if I don't call them, either of them, early in the morning, then, I don't get to it. So usually I pick up my phone, I call my mom. If it's not my mom, it's my sister or my cousin, so it's my little check mark next to maintaining good relationship with my relatives and my loved one and my friends. And then I get up and I have a big smoothie of raw fruits, just bananas, apple, kale, blueberries, you name it, almonds, and that's my healthy breakfast. And then my day starts. So that's kind of my little routine every day.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Do you do any meditation or journaling? Is that part of your day to day?
Not really. If One thing I do sometime middle of the day, I take some downtime. I may do some meditation. Actually, I did some yesterday, you know, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, something like this. I use the Headspace app, and I use also Headspace at night. They have a sleep cast, which lasts about 40 minutes. And there's different themes. In the first 20 minutes, they describe a scene. So it could be the monsoon somewhere in India. So you hear the rain in the background, and then this person describes this beautiful scene. And then after 20 minutes, the storytelling portion of the sleepcast ends, and then you only hear the sound of the rain. And usually by that point, I'm already asleep. And I love using those sleepcasts. It's a great way to fall asleep peacefully and with different images in your mind versus something that's been frustrating you, or some worries or problems that are looming in the distance. So
Yeah,
I really am a big
check
fan of
out.
Headspace. So
Nice, very nice. All right, so we're gonna switch gears again. This year, as a matter of fact, at Stone Ledge, so Age and I discovered this concept of deep work. There's a content creator by the name of Matt Gray, and he just articulates how to incorporate deep work into your life. And I have to tell you, Valerie, it has compounded the results, not just from a productivity perspective, but the amount of content we're putting out, the amount of videos AJ's editing, the amount of workshops we're able to do now, because for me, I'm a morning person. So I take, after my morning alignment, most mornings I block off the first 3 to 4 hours, usually 3 hours, no phone calls, no anything, to do deep work, because that's when my brain is just at its peak. So can you describe your methodology? And when I say deep work, just one more layer too, is like, everything is blocked. My door is closed. Even my computer won't interrupt me. It is literally just heads down and doing this work. And I can usually do about 8 hours worth of work in 3 hours because I'm in such a state of flow. So with all of that as the setup, do you have a methodology for when, okay, I know I've got this big project that's going to take that focus. So not the smaller tasks that you described earlier, but something that's going to take a great deal of focus. What do you do to make sure that you have that uninterrupted time where you can just create?
I am not sure I should be the person giving that that kind of advice, because this is not something that is my strong point. No. But I know that if I have something like this to do, something important that requires me to really internalize, read some data, analyze it, put something together, a lot of critical thinking. Um, I usually do it in bite size. I don't think I could do 3 hours the way you do. I'm going to do half hour, and then I may go and fold some laundry because I need to move. I'm not like I said, I get energized by seeing other people or moving or doing other things. So for me, it's really hard to be sitting at a desk for 3 hours. So what I'm going to do if that happens, I'm going to first, for that half hour that I'm going to dedicate to this deep thinking, I need to make sure that there's no distraction, that I isolate myself, because otherwise I'm tempted to say, hey, Dan, what about this? Or what about that? There's always an excuse for me to get I'm a squirrel. Let's put it this way. I'm a squirrel and I get distracted very easily. So remove distractions, but then I break it down in small bites of time. So it's going to be 20 minutes, a half hour, and then I may go and do something else and then come back to it. And the other thing too, I found that I need to have all my resources available, because if I don't have them available, this is going to be an excuse for me to delay the inevitable, or an excuse for me to get up and get sidetracked and get into something else, another rabbit hole, right? So again, I'm not very, very good at this, but what works for me is really small portions of deep work broken down with something that requires me to get up, walk, focus on something else, even if it's something that's mindless, like folding laundry, or whatever, emptying the dishwasher, something of that nature.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we discovered this concept called the ultradian rhythm. And so it's and please don't take away from this that you are not normal, Valerie. But for a lot of people, let's say it that way, the ultradian rhythm is that you can usually do focused work for about 90 minutes, like anyone, do focused work for about 90 minutes. And then that's when you usually start to get a little bit of that foggy brain, like it's just restless, I can't concentrate anymore. And then if you take a 15, 20, 30-minute break, do something else, like I said, away from the computer, something that's a little bit more mindless, then you can get back up to the peak and do another 90 minutes. We call that sprint, rest, reassess, figure out where you need to sprint again. And then I do that all day long. And so even in a 3-hour period, I'll do 2 of those sprints with a break in the middle. But here's Valerie's. It's like this. 30
Yeah.
minutes, take a break, 30 minutes. But if that works, because obviously you've been incredibly successful in your career, you all are doing just incredible work with Cockerell Consulting. You've just published another book. And so whatever works, that's kudos to you.
There is one thing I need to say though. If I work on a group project, because I feed off other people and bouncing ideas, I will be able to stay in a work session a lot longer than if I'm by myself. And I think that goes back to what I was saying about the fact that I get my energy, my creativity, my critical thinking from thinking out loud, which is something, by the way, that drives my husband crazy, because he's like, more of a internalizing introvert person. And we work on the project together, and I will ask a million questions as they come through my head. I mean, they're half baked most of the time. Sometimes I even have the answer, but it's just my way of getting him involved or communicating. I have this constant need of communicating. And I know for him, it's overwhelming. And he tells me, he said, you ask way too many questions. Do you really expect me to answer all these questions? And I said, no, but I need to vocalize and articulate what's going on in my head. So I think we all, operate very differently. But if I were working on the big project with a group, I would be able to stay at it a lot longer than if I worked by myself. That's for sure.
That sounds good. Very fair. All right. So I want to ask you kind of a fun question. So let's say that Cockerell Consulting has its biggest year ever, like huge, like 10x what you've ever done in the past. And now you're ready to hire someone, and it's hire someone for a big role. So either someone to also step on stage or someone to develop content, but not just not just, I don't want to say an admin role, because that's incredibly important too. And if Lori Santana, you're listening, you are a rock star, but it's a huge
great.
role.
She's outstanding, by the way.
Yeah, she is phenomenal. So let's just say that you're hiring someone to join Cockerell Consulting, and you can hire anyone you want, but it has to be either a fictional or historical figure. Who would you hire to join Cockerell Consulting?
Oh boy, I wish I could give you a very smart and educated answer. I'm gonna go with a Disney character.
Okay.
And my favorite Disney character, I think, of all times is one that hardly gets any credit. And that's Edna Mode from The Incredibles. And,
Oh, yes.
little lady with the big glasses and
Oh, yeah.
the haircut. I love Edna Mode. I think she is funny. She is witty. She is impatient, which I can relate to. No nonsense, very practical, right? And she gets to what needs to happen to the tactical part of things, which I think in a company we want people who don't just talk the talk; they need to make things happen. So I would totally want to have those skills in the company, have her, practicality and those no nonsense kind of personality. Love that. And she can get you a super suit. So there we go. You were asking me earlier about, what kind of a superpower I want you to have. Well, what about you have somebody on your company that gets you a super suit?
That's right.
And you just go, honey, where's my super suit? Wouldn't that be great?
That's awesome. That's a great
No, I love
answer.
her. I think she's a fun little character. And there is something you can ask my daughter. She'll tell you. She played soccer for many, many years, as you did. And every time she would start a soccer game, I would embarrass her. I would be on the sideline and I would do, which is an Edna Mode thing. I would say, go, fight, win. That was
Nice.
always the thing. And Margot would just roll her eyes
Yeah.
and it was all in good fun.
Yeah. I think
But
she's
anyway, big fan of
silently
Edna Mode.
she's silently cringing somewhere right now as we speak.
Yes.
And by the way, I don't think The Incredibles have put out a movie in a little while, so you may want to inquire to see if she's open to that. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
I
right.
would love to have some kind of standalone movie about Edna Mode. I think
Yeah.
she'd be great.
Yeah, I think so too. So on the serious side, throughout your leadership journey, and we've all had people that have impacted us many different parts of our experience, but who would you say has had the most significant impact on your life and your approach, specifically as it relates to being the leader that you've become?
Okay, two people. The first one, which maybe some of your audience will quickly, relate or understand, is my father-in-law and Lee Cockerell. So Lee influenced me primarily because of, other than the fact that he's a fantastic father-in-law, but he's also a big time management advocate. And when I worked for the opening of Disneyland Paris, I was a newly promoted entry-level leader. And every single leader at Disneyland Paris, Lee was in charge of resort at the time, but every single leader had to go and attend a time management class. And I was probably one of the last 10 managers out of the whole Euro Disney, as it was called at the time, one of the last 10 people to attend the seminar, because I thought, I don't have time for that. Well, let me tell you, if you don't have time to attend a time management class, you need a time management class. And that's what I learned the hard way. So I think in that respect, Lee was very influential in my leadership approach, because the bottom line is you can be a great strategist, you can be a great visionary, you can be an outstanding leader with great emotional intelligence, you can be creative, but if you don't have the time to put all this talent in practice, then what good does it do? It doesn't help you much. So that was it for me, learning about time management, learning about taking care of what's important, not urgent, taking care of the things you don't like doing first thing in the morning so they don't dangle over your head all day and give you that feeling of guilt. I think that was very important for me to learn all of that. And Lee was very, very clear about, and he explained in a very tactical way and practical way on how you can organize your time effectively. So that was the first person. The other person, I'm gonna have to say my mom. Obviously I wrote a book, Manage Like a Mother, also inspired not only by me being a mother of three, but also by being a child. And having, when you're a child, by virtue of being a child, you are on the receiving end of mothering, and you know what works and what doesn't work, and you can reflect back on what your mother or motherly figure in your life has done well and how it felt. And you probably remember also the times when it wasn't fair or frustrating, because mothers are not perfect. I wasn't a perfect mom, I wasn't a perfect leader either. So there's things that, and as a child, I know my mom, there were things that she did better than others, but one of the things that always amazes me, and it's a story I've shared on social media. My mom's always been very resilient. She came from a very poor family, grew up during World War II, had a lot of ups and downs in her life, but always never lost her optimism and her ability to just say, you know what, this too shall pass and we will overcome it. And she's 91 years old, going on 92, still lives in France independently in her home. And the one story that I share often, which some of your audience might have heard me say before, when my mom was 72, my dad passed away and she didn't drive. She didn't know how to drive. And suddenly she finds herself in this little town, no public transportation. And now she has to rely on other people, my sister or neighbors or friends, to get her to where she needs to be. And that wasn't going to work for her. I mean, knowing how, how would you say, strong-minded she was, she wasn't prepared to do that and always rely on others. So one day she called me, I was back in the US, and she said, Valerie, you'll never guess what I did today. And I said, what was that? And she said, I bought myself a car. That's the first thing she did. She bought the car, automatic one, because it's easier than stick shift. And then she said, and then I went and signed myself up at driving school. Can you, imagine the face of people working at the driving school? You have a 72-year-old woman who walks in and tells you, I'm signing up to get my driving license. And she did it. And it took her a little while, but she got a driving license. She had her car. For the longest time, for those, I think it took her about 5 months maybe to get a driving license. So for 5 months, the car was just sitting in the garage, unused. And eventually came the day she had a license. She got the car out. She doesn't go to, the highway or the big cities, but she goes to a grocery store. She goes to a hairdresser. She does what she has to do. And that ability to just say, I'm going to do this. I've got my mind set up on it, and I'm not going to let anybody else tell me what I should or should not do. Oh. And I find myself thinking about that when I am trying to figure something out and I feel, overwhelmed and frustrated and I can't do it. And technology is one of the things that I'm not very good at. And I always think of my mom, go like, she learned how to drive when she was 72 years old. If she can't do that, for sure, I should be able to figure this thing out, this social media or that Excel worksheet or whatever it is that's frustrating me at the moment. So I've learned time management from my father-in-law, and I have learned resilience and optimism from my mom.
Yeah, that's beautiful too. I love that story, by the way. And also, Lee Cockerell is just, I'm a fan. In fact, just one very quick story is, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months. It's, probably been a little while, but my son, AJ, who was 27 at the time, I said, listen, Lee's doing a 1-hour webinar. Why don't you dial in, because he's a really great speaker. As soon as the webinar was over, AJ came to me with a legal pad with pages of notes and I had heard some of the stories before, so I was listening and saying, oh yeah, I really appreciate that. AJ came with 2 or 3 pages of notes. So to say that Lee was someone that influenced your leadership career is not a leap for me, because I've seen the impact that he's made, not only in a big organization like Disney, but even on a 27-year-old new businessman. So that's top notch.
We've all, the entire Cockerell family, we've experienced many of these nuggets of wisdom at the Christmas dining table, or it always comes in little stories, little bite size, but I know they've all influenced tremendously my children and us,
Yeah.
but he still has at almost 80 years old. He's going to be 80 next year. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing his age publicly, but
You let me
he's
know. We can always
still
edit that out.
active and he's still active and he still influences many people and he's still full of wisdom and advice. And this is wonderful.
Fantastic. So Valerie, when you were talking about just making mistakes as a leader, making mistakes as a mother, even, which we've all done, I know that, and in my life, some of the most profound lessons and changes that I've made were based on mistakes that I was responsible for. So can you share a leadership mistake or mishap or error that really taught you a valuable lesson?
I think one of the biggest mistake I made, first of all, when in my 20s at Disneyland Paris, I didn't know anything about leadership. And I had not correlated what I said and what I did. And I realized later on that obviously, action speaks louder than words. So when I was a leader, I was at Festival Disney at the time at Disneyland Paris. And Festival Disney is a smaller version of Disney Spring. And I was managing retail locations over there. And I remember we had a 360 evaluation, and I had so much self-confidence. I was like, oh, this is going to come back. This is going to be great. I'm going to get great feedback from my team. And I still remember myself sitting in my office, opening that brown envelope with the result of the survey. And that was a big slap in the face because there were three things that came back that I did not expect. The first one was I was micromanaging. And I think it came because at the time I didn't know what leading was. Leading doesn't mean that you have to do everything. It means that you have to make sure that things get done. But for me, I was working 14 hours a day at the time, like a maniac, and I was involved in everything. And the people who reported to me, I had six direct report entry-level managers reporting to me, and they all felt that I was mingling in their business, not trusting them to do their job properly, maybe not doing the scheduling properly. I would go behind them and change it. I kept doing this kind of thing. So micromanaging was the first one. The second thing was I was full of ideas, but I had so many ideas a minute that my team members their heads were spinning and they could not understand what the priorities were, and my expectations were not very clear because I was bouncing from one idea to another. Oh, we're going to have carts here. Oh, we should sell cotton candy. What about we start selling balloons? Oh, we should put a cart in the parking lot. And they were all running around. At no point in time was I putting together a project plan, evaluating resources, timeline, who was delegating effectively. None of that was happening, and just too much. I had just too much on my plate and putting it on everybody else's plate that I was driving them crazy. And then the last thing was people said I did not respect balance in their life. And I was shocked because I was like, would they say this? I never expected them to work on weekends or do things like this. But I was working 14 hours a day. And for people who were reporting to me, who were also young and potentially thinking about their future career, they were thinking, if I want to be promoted, I need to emulate what she does. And therefore, I need to stay at work, as long as she does and commit as many hours. And it never occurred to me as a leader to say, hey guys, it's 6 o'clock. You have families, you have kids, go home and, go take care of your family and your loved ones. I never said that. I never vocalized it. I never asked them to go, I wasn't setting the example. That was the problem. And they thought that was the standard I set for myself. And therefore that was the standard I was expected of them. So that brown envelope, let me tell you, there were a lot of lessons in there. It was a one-time thing. I learned this the hard way. And, I started being more mindful about how I was behaving versus what I was also, trying to make sure I was being consistent with my expectations and with my behaviors.
Yeah, that's a great response. And it must have taken because, meaning the lessons must have taken because then you went on to just some incredible experiences and leadership roles at Disney. So it was almost probably a little bit of a gift in that brown envelope, right?
It was very much a gift, but the truth is you fall back into what you're comfortable with. And I kept on making mistakes. There's I remember specifically when we moved to the US. And one of the things is in Europe, we are very direct with feedback. There's not very candid. It can be a little bit abrupt at time. So when I started working at Walt Disney World, fortunately, I was considered an individual contributor. So I had a very small team. I had 2 people working on my team at Epcot. I was in charge of the assortments for Epcot. And I was kind of the connection between the operation and the buying office. And the 2 people who were working with me, sometimes I was being very direct and very blunt with my feedback because that's the way we do things in Europe. Likewise, when I got involved with the buying office, I would go and tell buyers, give them some direction, some very clear feedback. And there were 2 people at Walt Disney World at the time that I could rely on to give me honest feedback. And I remember one of them caught me red-handed once, asking a buyer something that, anyway, I won't get into the detail. And she told me, she said, on your way out, Valerie, can you stop by my office? Mm-hmm. And we were at the buying office, which is located in Kissimmee. And I stopped by her office thinking maybe she had a question for me or something, trivial. And she says, Valerie, you really got to think about your timing when you give feedback and how it comes across. And she just, explained very clearly with no uncertain terms. She let me know what I was doing wrong. And I was thrilled that she would feel comfortable doing that. And I couldn't thank her enough for the gift because that's what it was. It was a gift. But, again, that was in 2000. So that was already, 9-10 years in my career. And you still learn, I don't think there's a there. There's no destination. There's not a day where you can say, okay, I'm the perfect leader now. I've got it. It's same with being a mom, by the way.
Oh yeah.
There's no day where you go, okay, now I check all the box. I do everything perfectly.
Right.
No, you keep learning.
I could not agree with you more from a leadership perspective and a mom perspective. So that's a really great example. How are you doing on time, Valerie? Because I'd like to ask you one more question, but also we have this thing that's kind of like a rapid fire series of questions.
I'm good.
Okay, perfect.
I'm good.
All right, so I'm going to wait to ask you the last question until after rapid fire, but there's 7 questions and it's literally 1-word answers. And so with as little thought as possible, nothing extraordinary, but just it'll help us understand you just a little bit more, get to know you a little bit more as well. All right, so Valerie, to decompress, the mountains or the ocean?
Say that again.
To decompress, so to de-stress, the mountains or the ocean?
Mountains.
Perfect. For adventures, summer or winter?
Winter.
Nice. If you only had time for one, meditation or journaling?
Meditation.
Sweet. Comfort food, sweet or salty?
Salty.
You too. All right.
I don't have to think about that one. That's an easy one.
That's an easy one for me too, all day long. So you have a day completely to yourself. Is it indoors with a good book by the fire or outdoors on a long, quiet hike?
Outdoors, definitely.
Sweet. Pickleball or tennis?
Oh, that's a tough one. I play tennis longer, so tennis.
Perfect. And the last one, your favorite client experience on stage in front of thousands or small groups seeing the direct impact?
Probably small groups seeing the direct impact.
Yeah, nice.
I'm a fixer. I need to see what I'm doing.
Yeah, awesome. That's amazing. Well, you have been just an incredible guest. I have literally one more question for you. And I know it might be hard to take all of the incredible information that you shared and aggregate it into one tip or life hack or lesson, but what advice would you give to someone that is struggling to find success and fulfillment as a leader?
You know, I guess if I look back at my life and what I did successfully, it always came from curiosity,
Mm.
from that triggered so many good things in my life. So I think if you're curious, you learn, you evolve, you get more creative, you get new ideas, you can find people who have talents that you don't have. They'll be able to help you. And learning from this, learning from that diversity, I think that's a beautiful thing. So I think, for young people, trying to be curious, try to investigate, knock on the doors, open the door. It may lead to an opportunity you didn't expect. It may lead to a failure, which you can learn from. It may lead to understanding yourself a lot more and generally just growing as a person. So curiosity is really that trigger that can bring all that to you. And I think it's worked for me. So I believe it can work for others too.
That is one of the best concise pieces of information for any aspiring leader, even anyone that's been in leadership role for a while. Even someone like me that's been a leader for decades, is stay curious. And the more curious you are, the more doors are going to open, the more you're going to find yourself exposed to new ideas and new individuals and new opportunities. So I could not have asked for a better final answer.
Thank
So,
you.
so Valerie, you have been just, I mean, I love, having conversations with you in real life, but you've just been a wonderful guest for this Reimagine 10Q series. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for people to find you?
Valerie at cockerellconsulting.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and as of late, I'm on TikTok because
Wow.
my daughter insisted that I do some TikTok, post and stuff like this. I'm such a baby when it comes to social media. But anyway, you can, LinkedIn and Cockerell Consulting is probably the most efficient way to get hold of me.
Perfect, perfect. And we'll put the links in the show notes below to make it really easy for people. So, and speaking of people, thank you all for watching. If you like this video, again, this is the brand new series for Stone Ledge, replacing the classic 10 Qs, which let me tell you, we interviewed a lot of really amazing people for those classic videos, which are also available on the YouTube channel. But if you loved what Valerie had to share, please like and subscribe to the channel so that we can continue to do great interviews like this. And remember, we also have a brand new newsletter that's out called Align and Thrive, where we give you weekly tips and topics on these two critical topics: how to become an aligned leader and then how to embrace mindfulness. So thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Valerie. And I hope you all
Thanks,
have
Michelle.
a wonderful rest of your day. Much love.